that if when a teenager opens her mouth, they're lying. And I've always said, when a mother opens her mouth about her child, she's bragging. Patrick is an only child. And people used to ask me how come, and I'd say when you hit perfection the first time, why continue? But probably a more true statement would be, is they put my age on the maternity ward roster. Now, Patrick has always said, we've always told him we're practicing being parents. There are a few things I think you might like to know about him. He swam before he was a year old. He won a baby contest at the age of 1, but what happened is that all the children got ribbons. I think they were afraid of the mothers. He was active in sports. He was very good at swimming. He loved Dungeons and Dragons. And he carried a rifle down Michigan Avenue on St. Patrick's Day. It was illegal because he went to St. John's Military Academy and he was part of their drum and rifle corps. Now, I should mention that 2 times we were very surprised about what happened with his feud past. We got a phone call from Washington, D.C. when he was a page there. Said, Mom, I need my tuxedo. Well, come to find out, they used all the pages as extra security for President Clinton's inaugural balls. The second time he really surprised us is when he came over to Cape Canaveral and told us, Mom, I'm going with some friends to China. We're going to start a business. And that's why we're here tonight. My son, or our son, Patrick.
I mean, how can you follow that? It's absolutely amazing. I gave the initial presentation to my parents. I talked a little bit about it. And like normal presentations that I do, I always skip over my background. I was like, you don't really need to talk about yourself. Just get to the matter, right? Get to the fact. But my dad is always very kind to remind me that it's good to tell people, how did you get to know these things? How did you get to understand these things? I came from a small town, like a lot of us. I came from a town of about 7,000. I think at its max it was 7,000. When I was growing up, it was about 5,000 people. And all my life, all I ever wanted to be, like any young boy, is to be like his father, right? Or to be like his mother. And those are the people I looked up to all my life. And my father was a politician, and my mother was a lawyer. So all of my life, that's all I expected of myself. And so I went around doing all the things that anyone wanted to become a lawyer or wanted to become a politician do. They go to Washington, D.C., or they go to work on Wall Street, or they go to try to apply to a Marshall law school. And in all of those things, even though I did very well at that, I didn't really, they didn't really mesh with me. They weren't really that interesting to me. And then about, when I was 26 years old, I had the opportunity to buy my family's insurance agency, my dad's company. My dad was looking to retire, and you're 26, you're young, you're excited, you think, wow, this is such a great opportunity. And then you actually wake up one day and you realize you're the boss, and all of your employees are 50 years old, and looking at who the heck are you, right? And where did you come from, right? And you're trying to convince them how to run this company, how to make this company to the future. And you sit there, you give them give them ideas how we're going to do things, and about 5 minutes later, they sneak over to see Dad and ask him what to do, right? So I did that for about 5-6 years, and I started to see that maybe this wasn't my future. And Dad was really good about it, because when I finally came to the point that I decided that this wasn't going to be my future for the rest of my life, he was okay about selling the agency and moving on. And to me, I think that was one of the most courageous things he's ever done, because I know he spent his entire life building it. So I had hats off to him. So I was 31 years old. Let me go up here a little bit. I was 31 years old. I had a bit of money. I had some experience in running businesses for about 5 years. And so I decided to go and do my MBA, because after you've run a business, the most logical thing to do is do an MBA, because you know how to run a business, so now you should learn how to run a business. And I remember sitting in class and the professor's trying to tell me how to, how a company runs and how to train employees and how to do, human resources. And I'm like, yeah, this is not how you do it. Okay? And yes, that doesn't work either. And yeah, that doesn't work either. And so eventually, after a while, I just don't, they stop asking me questions, right? They're just like, yeah, you go sit in the back, we'll give you an A, just go away, okay? So, right about that time, I had about half my class was full of Chinese students who had come over on a grant by a company, what was it called? It was an FAW, Ichi Chua, but they came over by AIG. AIG, the gentleman who founded it, Greensburg, who founded it, he actually had founded AIG in China. AIG was one of the first international companies founded in China. And he had developed a scholarship that he gave to the FAW people. And so we had become fast friends over the last year doing our MBA together. And they had invited me to come back to China after graduating. And so I sat there for a period of time contemplating, like Mom had talked, going over to Cape Canaveral, thinking about things. And I was there late at night, really, really late at night, 2 a.m. in the morning, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I remembered this story about a Hasidic rabbi. I don't know if some of you have heard this, but it's a story of a Hasidic rabbi sitting on his deathbed talking to his son. And the Hasidic rabbi says to his son, all my life I've tried to change the world. And now that I'm at my deathbed, I realized that what I'd done was not the right way to do things. He says, when I was young like you, I tried to change my hometown. It didn't work. And then later on, I tried to change the state I lived in, and that didn't work. And then later on, I got the even bigger and bigger goals, and I decided that I wanted to change the world, and that didn't work. So finally, after looking back at my life, and all the things I tried to change, I want to tell you one bit of advice. He says, if you really want to change something, you need to start with yourself. You have to adapt yourself. If you do adapt yourself, you do change yourself, you have a potential to not just change yourself, but your family. You have your chance to change not only your family, but maybe the surrounding community, the people that are around you. And if you're lucky, maybe your state. And if you're really, really lucky, and you really try to find out as much about yourself and really try to make yourself grow as much as possible, maybe one day, even the world. So I remember this late at night, 2 a.m. in the morning, it struck me. And I said, I could spend the rest of my life sitting in the United States, running companies and saying all the great things about myself. Or I could go to a different country and try to really find out what kind of person I am. Right? So what I'm talking to today is some of the revelations that I found, not necessarily about myself, but the things that are going on in China today. Things that, because of my experiences, I've noticed, and things that, looking back now on the United States, looking back and now on the beautiful country that we live in, what is our future over the next, let's say, 20, 30 years? What should we expect, not only of China, but also of ourselves and of the world around us? Okay. So I told you a little bit of my background. We skip over that. Okay. One of the amazing things, and some of the people in this audience I had the pleasure of talking to earlier, some of us have been veterans of the World War II that are here. And I am extremely proud of those people who fought for our country, and some people who suffered greatly for our country. This was a threshold event that changed how America was in the world. Literally in the world. Up until World War II, or the beginning of World War II, America was just a part of a larger pattern, a larger spectrum of countries. After World War II, we came into a point of becoming the world's manufacturer. The reason why we became the world's manufacturer is because Germany, Japan, all the other world's manufacturers were knocked out. They were gone. And so we became the de facto manufacturer. And because of that, we had unprecedented wealth and unprecedented domestic economy. In fact, by the 1970s, our economy, by I think 73, our economy became 35% of the entire world's economy. We literally was the center of the world in dealing with economic power. Now, like all economic events, all black swan events, they don't last forever. The world readjusts. The one thing that you will learn about, and I'm sure we've all seen this in our lives, we grew up, we learned something, and all of a sudden we realize, oh my God, we have to change. But I got to the top. Now I should rule the roost. And like, no, that's not how the world works. It keeps changing. And that is what's happening now, is ever since like 75, the world has been readjusting itself. Back in the old days, back before World War I, back before time existed, China actually used to have the largest economy in the world. And then, of course, we had the boom of the colonial times of the Europeans. West Europeans took hold. Then we had World War I, World War II. U.S. took hold. And now, slowly over the last 30, 40 years, we've had this readjustment. And it's not been easy, to be quite frank. I think a lot of the challenges that we face nowadays in the United States is because we have been successful for so long that this readjustment to becoming a part of something of a bigger tapestry has not been easy, okay? And so what can we do about this? One of the things that I encourage a lot of people to do, especially younger people, maybe, and even people who are older, is to constantly try to learn a new language or a new culture, okay? Because one of the things that we had a benefit of is, as being the de facto economy of the world, everyone had to learn our language. I remember growing up, we used to go to Mexico, we used to go to Europe, we used to go to other places, and I remember Americans saying, you need to learn English, right? I always remember that people need to be learning English. If they come to America, they need to learn English, right? And we always said that. And to be quite frank, if you wanted to do business in America, you wanted to do business with Americans, you needed to speak English because that was the only language in many cases we spoke. Now, when you're the dominant economy, you can do that. You can demand it as people. And people, in order to survive, people need money, people need jobs, they will learn your language. But that's not true anymore. The rise of China has made it very apparent that English will no longer be the dominant language, right? Chinese, for the most part, do not speak English. Okay? Most of the Chinese you see in America do speak very good English, excellent. But you go to China, you will find out very quickly, almost no one speaks English. You go to Spanish-speaking countries, you go to some of the big cities, they'll speak English very fluently. But you go outside the big cities, English is not a main language. Germany, France, Japan, exactly the same. We, as a people, the United States, we have had the pleasure of growing up in an economy blessed by people who gave their lives and worked very hard in World War II and after World War II to create such a beautiful economy. But that is not going to be the fact anymore. So we have to, the younger generation has to learn to adapt. Like we're talking earlier about adapting, we have to learn to adapt as well. One of the things is learning another language. Now I will tell you, I am the last person in the world who should learn another language, okay? I sat in China for 2 years not speaking a single word, right? And I can tell you the one story. I used to live in this place in, I don't know if you know Shanghai, but I used to live in this place in Shanghai, downtown Shanghai. And I would get up every morning, okay? And I would walk outside my door. I couldn't talk to anyone, not a single soul. And I walk over to this noodle shop, okay? And on the wall of this noodle shop, they had 38 things to order from. The only reason I knew there were 38 is they were numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And I could count them. And I would sit there every morning. I'd wake up every morning, go up, and I'd point at one and go, ah, ah, ah. And then the lady would go, mian. And I'd go, oh, mian, right? And then I would go, so that would be the word I'd learn that day, mian. And then the next day I'd go back and I'd point at the second one and go, ah, ah, ah. And you go, oh, fan, right? And so eventually, after 38 days, I learned how to speak, learned how to order 38 things. Not the fastest way to learn Chinese, I'm here to tell you, right? But, and I will tell you, out of the 38 things, only 8 of them I really like to eat, right? So, but I had to learn, because I decided that when I moved to China, I was going to live in a neighborhood where no one spoke English. All the signs weren't in English. Everything was in Chinese. And so every day I was forced to speak another language, or starve, or not get water, or have my power turned off. And it was only by being forced that I eventually did learn. Okay? Do I recommend this method to other people? No. This is a very bad method of learning languages. But it's very effective for a person like me because I'm very stubborn, right? I refuse to learn anything. I'm not horrible with languages, but it did work. It took 5 years, but it did work. So, one of the things we need to do as a populace, or maybe, and I would really encourage you, if you know people, younger people, really do encourage them to learn a second language. It's exceptionally important for the future. Okay. The other thing that's going on now is a lot of corporations, specifically U.S. corporations, are what I call surfing the world. Surfing the world. And what that means is they are earning a majority of their profits, internationally. Not just a small portion, but a majority of the profits. If you open up and you look at Apple, Google, Starbucks, KFC, Walmart, go right down the list. And you look and you break down their financial results, you will notice that a majority of their profits, not a minority anymore, a majority of the profits are coming internationally. They're not coming from the US anymore. And that's why stocks are up. I have a good friend who says, you know why I know the US economy is doing great? Because our stocks are up. I said, really? He said, yeah, have you looked at the financial earnings? Yeah, they point up. I said, look, if you break them down, point by point, you will start to realize the majority of the money is no longer coming from or generated in the United States. And this is something that a lot of foreign companies are doing. Here's just a small list of Fortune 500 companies. Apple, let's see if I can do this right. Apple, Cisco, Pepsi, Microsoft, Johnson, Qualcomm, Amgen, Oracle, Coca-Cola. You can go right down the list, every single one. All of that money, this is money that they hold outside the United States. Remember we had this recent tax bill? We're going to bring the money back to the United States. I remember hearing the same thing during Bush. Remember Bush and they claimed the same, we're going to bring the money back to the United States. I still haven't seen it from the Bush years, so I don't know if Trump's going to make it happen. But if he can make it happen, good for him, right? Good for him. But my philosophy, the money is not going to come back. And the reason being is there is a ton of opportunities now in other places in the world that are compelling and exciting. And I will tell you what's going on in China because I live there, okay? China, up until probably about 2 years ago, almost all transactions were done in cash, right? No one wanted to use these credit cards, maybe they used the bank card once in a while, but everything used to be done in cash, okay? And Visa, Amex, all those, no one used those. It was not, people thought they were kind of weird if you used Visa. So everyone used to use cash. Now here's something funny. Over the last 2 years, China has gone from paying only in cash, only trusting cash, to doing everything cashless. You go to anywhere in China, even the small little vendors, I have a guy who makes the jiaozi, the noodles on the street, right? He's got a little stand like this, and and he's making the noodles, okay? He's got the noodles going, and the noodles cost like five renminbi, like 50 cents, right? Or it's like 60 cents, right? And I look and I ask this, like, you know, how am I going to pay? I try to give him 60 cents. Oh, don't pay me. Pay me wire, you know, pay me through your phone. That's 60 cents. No, use your phone. It's better. I was like, really? I can give you the money here. It's in my hand. No, use the phone. Right? So the society has gone completely cashless. You go to anywhere in the U.S., anywhere in China, Walmart, Starbucks, the smaller vendors, everything you pay by phone. You have no credit cards. You have no cash. An entire society has moved in literally 2 years, 2-3 years, to cashless. The reason being is the government, the Chinese government wants to do something, they do it in a big way. And they do it completely, with no stop. So, why did they move to cashless? Because there are so many transactions in China that are done by cash, they were getting no tax revenue. Right? It's like, hey, I'll pay you in cash, but you and me, we don't need to pay. We don't need to tell Uncle Sam, right? No, not at all. So you think that just goes on in the United States? No. It goes on everywhere in the world, right? So China decided that, okay, we will give up this whole cashless idea. We'll let someone do the monopoly as long as we collect the tax revenue. So the government had a huge incentive to collect taxes. And Alipay, which is the company that does it, had a huge incentive, which was they got huge amounts of business. And because of this, there was a giant incentive to create a cashless economy. The next thing that's going on in China that's also will leapfrog the United States, unfortunately, is electric cars. We've heard the whole electric car thing in the United States now for almost 15 years. Thank God for Edwin Musk. I mean, this guy, I love him, right? He's a crazy man, right? He started PayPal. I sold that, made $2 billion, but that's not enough. I got to start 5 more companies, right? So SpaceX, you know, I mean, this man has literally changed the face of business, right? Just one man, right? I got to love this man. Well, why do I think that China will leapfrog the US in electric cars? The reason being is China has a reason. They have a motivation. China produces no oil and gas. They have none. Right? Does the US produce oil and gas? Heck yeah. Right? Do we have lobbyists in Washington that really support that oil and gas? Heck yeah. Do they have any incentive to push electricity? Heck no. So, China has all the incentive. Not only do they have no oil and gas, so they have no one fighting against them. But not only that, but they also have one other big thing: pollution. Oh. They have literally the worst pollution in the world, right? They win at a lot of things, but pollution is probably not something they're proud of, but they really have very bad pollution. So electric cars are the one miracle way that they can help get rid of the pollution. You get me? Because they've tried to shut down or reduce the factories from polluting. But they realize that if they get the factories to shut down from polluting, guess what? It costs money. The factories complain, and they also have lobbyists too. They will push, right? So it's much easier to get people, the individual like you and me, to force them to buy cars, right? So that's going to be the next thing. And if you want to see, I can back up my story. If you want to go look around on the internet, lithium batteries, the lithium material, look at who's the biggest buyers for lithium material all around the world. The number one buyer, the Chinese government. That's how you know it's coming. The other part that produces electricity, like Musk, is photoelectric cells, right? He makes the new for the roofs now, right? Where you can make the solar roof, right? The largest producer of photoelectronic in the world are the Chinese. So they are putting together the pieces all around the world to create an electric economy. And so they definitely are on board. Once again, it's not driven by them because of a want. They don't want to become this innovator. It's driven because of a need. They're forced out of survival. Pollution is deadly. People are very unhappy, so they have to find a way to leapfrog. Okay? Driverless cars, this new automation cars, I'll skip over that. And the last one is in virtual reality. Now here's something that I need to tell you very clearly, okay? America is like heaven. You may not know it, right? But if you've lived in China for a long time, right? Where every day you wake up and there's thousands of people, right? Pollution everywhere. America is really like heaven, right? You go to the supermarket, there's food everywhere, right? I can't even figure out how many brands there are, right? I walk down the aisles, there's so much food just flowing out at me, right? We have beautiful parks. We live in places like Winter Park that are absolutely beautiful, amazing places. And we are really blessed. To be quite frank, the rest of the world does not live like us. This is very much the ultimate dream of most Chinese, is to live in America. In fact, America is called 美国, our beautiful country, for a reason. Most Chinese, this is the dream. They want to come here to live here. Now, China is filled with 1.3 billion people, okay? If most Chinese came to the United States, we'd have a lot of problems, right? We wouldn't know where to put all of them, right? So, the thing that's going to really take off, the thing that's going to equalize, the thing that really is going to be a game changer in China is going to be virtual reality. Because for the first time in their life, they can put on those little goggles, right? And for 4 or 5 days every day, they can live in the United States of America. They can live in the place that they always wanted to. They don't have to worry about pollution. They don't have to worry about people crawling all over them. They don't have to worry about the small houses they live in. They can live in the places that you live every day. And that is why virtual reality, even though we will probably invent virtual reality, that's why the Chinese will probably make it into $1 billion trillion business. Because to them, it's something that will increase their survivability, will increase their life. It'll make their life like ours. We have the benefit of waking up every morning and going to beautiful places. They do not. So that's why these 3 technologies most likely will be driven by China. They will probably leapfrog us and most likely lead in them. Autonomous vehicles. These vehicles, driving around, you see them by Google, and the Google cars once in a while slam into other cars and don't work so well, right? But autonomous vehicles will probably not be a big hit in China. And the reason being is a very funny business, and I'll tell it to you, is when in 2005, they tried to revamp all the logistic business in China for the customs clearance, to make it easy, okay? Customs clearance has about like 10 million people in the customs business that work in the government customs section. And they figured they could cut out about 80% of those people and streamline the customs. When the government figured out that they would lose 8 million jobs, do you think they did it? No. Because the one thing China has more than any other country, people, right? So, autonomous vehicles. Now, autonomous vehicles is a good idea for individual drivers, but they also eliminate truck drivers, right? Transportation drivers. And those are millions upon millions of jobs in China. Will the government want to eliminate those jobs? No. So autonomous vehicles will not take off in China because, once again, anything that eliminates jobs, anything that stops people from getting work is blocked. Yeah. It's kind of a strange situation because you have a very innovative society, very interested in you know, making money. They clearly can make a cashless society, but because people are such a big problem, they will literally make things absolutely inefficient so people can keep their jobs. Think about the US Post Office. Sorry for any post office workers here. But we still have it, right? So even though email is the big thing. So what I always recommend is, if you know any younger people, there is, as I pointed out earlier, there's a huge amount of money being made internationally by US companies. There's a huge amount, I mean, there's always complaints about this bringing the money back. Well, I always tell the students, you don't need to bring the money back. Go to it. The money's there in China, the money is there in Cambodia, the money is there in Vietnam. If you go in, you can show Coca-Cola, you can show Motorola, you can show them you can speak Chinese, you can work locally, they will hire you like that. In fact, you'll be on the top of the list, you'll be promoted immediately. I know 2 or 3 guys who went and taught English, they learned Chinese on their own. They are senior executives in China. They were promoted in 5 years to the senior executive position. Because they're foreigners who know Coca-Cola, they're foreigners who know Microsoft, and they know how to get business done. The money is there. The opportunities are there. We have to stop, as younger people, we have to stop depending on the government here. We have to stop depending on someone giving us a job here. We have to be willing to go out and get it. If the money is in France, go to France. If the money is in Germany, go to Germany. If the money is in China, go to China. Learn Chinese. You know, that is what has made this country great. There was a time where we were not the leading domestic maker in the world. There was a time that we had to go out to Italy and France and set up offices. There was a time when we had to expand and be international to survive. And we did it. And we did it great. And we need to adapt and do that again. And this is the thing that we need to tell. If you know someone who's young, who's aggressive, introduce them to me. Send their email to me. I'll hand out my cards later on. I'm more than happy to help anyone, encourage anyone. It doesn't have to be China. Anywhere in the world, anywhere in Asia, I'm more than happy to encourage young people, middle-aged people, anyone to go out there. The opportunities are there. The other thing too is we need to start being partners. Instead of putting up walls, we need to start being partners with our neighbors. One of the things the Chinese are really good at is developing partnerships with their neighbors, investing in their neighbors, sending factories in their neighbors. The Chinese companies, especially the manufacturers, they're running into a big problem now. And this has been unprecedented over the last 30 years. Chinese labor is getting to be one of the most expensive in the world. It's shocking right now. Actually, the labor in Mexico labor, manufacturing labor, is 40% cheaper than Chinese labor. 40%. And in some fields, like the auto industry, almost 60%. China has saw this problem coming, has seen this issue coming with their own labor, especially on the east coast of China. So what they have done is a lot of the local, like in Shanghai and Suzhou, which is on the border, Wenzhou, they have all started to outsource their factories to Vietnam. They keep their name on the door, the Chinese name on the door, but the factory that's actually producing is in Vietnam or Cambodia or somewhere else. They keep the control of the factory. They own the factory, but they outsource the labor to someone else. We need to be doing the same thing. I'm not a person that says we're going to bring back factories to the US. It's going to be extremely hard to do that. But I am a person that says, look, we can invest in our neighbors who have competitive labor. to bring those products back, to compete against China, to compete against Vietnam, to compete against Germany, to compete against other countries. This we can do. And this is what the Chinese are doing now. Because they're in the same dilemma that we have. Their labor costs have gone up. The younger generation does not, most of the younger generation does not want to work in factories. People who are over like 18, even people who are farm, they don't want to work in factories anymore. We were in Mexico last year, right? There are most of the average Mexican does not worry. They would be more than happy to work in a factory. So you have an opportunity here. Like the Vietnamese, who don't mind working in the factory. We have an opportunity to create opportunities, create ventures with our neighbors to bring the manufacturing back. This thing that Trump's talking about, I am a total supporter of bringing the manufacturing control back to the United States. We need to be running it here. We need to make investments in the factories and bring those back because we consume a lot of these products already. Invest in our neighbors. We must adapt. We must think differently. Okay, last. China will become the #1 buyer of everything. Everything. And I mean everything, okay? The Chinese economy has now gotten to the point that you name it, even like avocados, right? They're crazy about avocados, right? We're thinking about exporting avocados to Mexico. The Mexicans are like, you mean Chinese like avocados? Yeah, okay, we'll send them all there, right? They have become, slowly over time, the de facto buyer of everything. Why? It all goes back to, we have 383 million people here. China has 1.3 billion people there, right? So they have much more mouths than we do. So for Coca-Cola, you're looking at Coca-Cola, Starbucks, you go down the list, coffee, all those things. They will be the #1 buyer in the future. What does that mean for us? It means that we'll be paying higher prices. Like it or not, we will be paying higher prices. Do they do this intentionally? No, they do not do this to cause you harm. Because your avocado prices go up, they're not trying to stop your guacamole, right? They don't hate your guacamole. The reason being is their prices, their domestic prices have gone insane. When I used to live in Shanghai, downtown Puxi, okay? When I was there in 2002, is when I first landed in Shanghai, 15 years ago, I could get a bowl of noodles, big bowl of noodles, for about 80 cents. Big one. And it was like almost as big as my head, right? You could sit there and eat it all day. The same bowl, which is about half the size now, is about $6. And in some places, the higher places, which I don't go because they're high end, $8, right? 1,000% increase in about 14 years. 1,000% increase. So the reason why they need to do it is they need to keep the prices down. Because they need to create stability. Because once again, they have so many people, they need to keep those costs down. Now the problem with that is it keeps their costs down, but guess what it does to us? Rises our costs, right? And are we happy about that? No, right? So once again, becoming friends with our neighbors like the people in Mexico when they're thinking about where to ship the avocados, right? Maybe you ship a few to me, right? Yeah. So once again, China does a lot of things, not out of things to be innovative, not out of world dominance, but they do it out of survival. They do it because they have to. They didn't grow up in a country like the United States that has many, many resources. We have trees, we have coal, we have oil, we have gold, we have uranium, it just goes on and on and on. So the thing that I want you to learn, this is We're at the end, by the way. Shh, yeah. The thing I want you to learn is two things. One, the next generation, people like myself, a little bit younger than myself, we're all going to have to learn to adapt. We're all going to have to wake up someday, maybe go down to the noodle shop and point at the sign. Okay? It's going to have to happen. Somewhere along the line, we're either my generation or the generation underneath me, or the younger generation, is going to have to learn another culture, another language. No two ways about it. The other thing is, I want you to understand that China does not do a lot of things because they want world dominance. That is not what they want. They do a lot of things just for survival. To feed their population, which is so massive. To reduce their pollution, which is so bad. To capture their tax dollars, which they don't get any of it. They do all of these things not out to spite anyone, but just survive. Okay. And that is my little information for the day. Either adapt or survive, right? Adapt to survive, right? As the Hasidic rabbi said, you have to adapt in order to change, right? Okay, and that is all. Questions? Dad is in charge of the official question and answer. Gentlemen.
Oh, by the way, there's some food over here. Chinese appetizer.
Yeah.
And wine.
Yeah.
I understand your explanation for learning Chinese and going to China to get a job. But that means you have to live in China, and you just told us everybody in China wants to live here.
Yeah. That's always the weird paradigm, you know. Should I go there? Then you go there, you have to come here, right? What I would say is, you know, when you're younger, you should be more adventurous. You should learn to adapt. You should, you know, it's like the Old West. I mean, there are people who sit out, you know, when we had the Wild West, people sat on the East and enjoyed the good life, and people went out West with the stagecoaches and, you know, and founded San Francisco. And I mean, you have to have, I think the next generation, from my viewpoint, needs to be more adventurous. We need to go out. The economy, the domestic economy in the U.S., we need that shot in the arm. We need people to come back who know international. And the reason why I say this is not because I want people from the United States to do this. It's because people from Germany, people from Japan, people from France, they're already doing this. A lot of other economies besides the United States, you know, we're probably the last, already do send a lot of their youngest and brightest internationally to build businesses, to learn how to do business internationally. So yes, it is a paradigm, you know. We send them internationally to do business, and maybe, you know, it's like the old days. I had a talk early on about the gentleman who's from, his family's from Italy. Back in the old days, the Italians would come to America, they'd earn the money, and they'd send it back home to Italy, you know, to help rebuild after the war. We don't have any war going on, but I think we can do the exact same thing. Is we can go earn the money that's already being earned by our international companies, bring some of that money home. We don't have to wait for the politicians to do it. We can do it ourselves.
I have two comments about the money. For instance, you know, one of the problems with actually you talk about money leaving, going overseas, but one of the problems what a lot of countries have is that China brings back the money, and especially I know in Australia there's quite a big discussion about China investing in mining, for instance, in Western Australia and Southwestern Australia. And the other thing I had was about the about English. As a student of English for a long time, one of the things Tom Friedman has pointed out, and a number of other people, when we talk about globalization, is that English is so an adaptable language that people pick up a lot of stuff. And like the airline industry, you know, the standard for airline pilots is English. And now I don't know what, when an airline pilot, I don't know any airline pilots that fly into China, but I would think that they would have to learn English, and then the other way around. If people in Air China, I'm sure that the pilots have to learn English in order to come to the United States or come to almost any country, Western country, because they have to learn English.
Okay. One of the things about China, when they what they call recycle their money, a lot of what you see the investments, specifically like in the mining industry, specifically like the lithium batteries we talk about, those are all strategic investments. Okay. So some of those investments, I think the ones you're alluding to, they're more strategic than economic. What they're trying to do is, once again, we're talking about about purchasing the food resources, purchasing the ore and gas. What they're just trying to do is have strategic strategic reserves. Remember we had this strategic oil reserve that we had for many years. No one can tell me where the oil is, right? This is all we have, this strategic oil reserve. And I'm like, where is it? And people look at you like, huh? They're like, but we have it. You're like, okay, yeah, but where is it? No one knows, right?
Well, the rare earth, for instance, China.
Yeah.
Rare earth, but using electronics, that's China.
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the few things China does have, is they have these rare earth materials, which they were blessed with. And luckily the emperors had no use for it, because trust me, if the emperors 2,000 years ago had a use for it, it wouldn't be there anymore. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, luckily they didn't, because that would have been all used up and gone by now. So the other thing is, English is a de facto language. I utterly agree with you. But one of the things you start to realize is, unless, like any language, unless you use it all the time, it slowly goes away. And when I was in Mexico for a year, we came back to China, China this last year, and man, it was hard for me, because I was like, it took me like 2 or 3 days to finally figure, people to figure me out and me to figure, because your language does, as long as you practice it. So the people in the airlines, they're practicing all the time, but I think once they go back to their home village or their hometown, and they're surrounded by people who don't speak English all day long, it doesn't last. That's really the problem with language. And if you speak, like in China, they don't necessarily just speak 1 or 2 languages. They'll speak English, they'll speak Chinese, and then they'll speak the local dialect, which will be even different than Chinese. And so you sit there, and like the average Chinese person will speak 3 languages, and so I'm like saying, if we can't speak a second one, come on, we can at least step up to the plate, And you start to realize, you go back 70, 80 years, and a lot of us, our grandparents were immigrants. They spoke Norwegian, like in our family, spoke Norwegian. In Irish, they spoke some language I can understand. My grandfather, but I guess it was English he was speaking, but we spoke at one time. Our families did speak multi-language. We did speak multiple languages. We just need to go back to that time. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What part do the unions play in the Chinese economy? Or are there any unions? Industrial unions.
What? Is that it? And there are. It's never been, I've never kind of chased after that field. I know there is, there's a part of the Communist Party that is a de facto union that oversees policies for employment, that oversees policies for the workers. But I've never had the exposure to those people. The only time that I've had exposure to any policies in dealing with HR or unions is when I've been brought in front of a court and the person says I fired them illegally, and then had to contest with the government that I did fire them legally and that they were stealing records from our company, and there was a reason why we terminated them, right?
So the worker doesn't have to belong to a union.
No, typically they don't belong to union. Usually the government itself has a union establishment that overlooks the workers, and the government itself oversees the kind of the union policy of the workers. I'll give you an example. In 2000, I think it's 2007, they passed a policy that literally changed the way of hiring practices in China. They did it across all board, okay? And what happened is before 2007, you could hire someone and fire someone like that, okay? You could hire and fire, if you hired someone like today, and you'd worked for me for 10 years, you were a loyal employee, right? And you got in a fight with my wife because you didn't like her shoes, right? Her shoes are pretty nice, by the way. You didn't like her shoes, right? Then I could fire you tomorrow. And there would be no severance, there'd be no way to go back. In 2007, right before the crash, I think the Chinese government knew it was coming, right? They changed the hiring policy to be more reflective of European law. So if you had someone for 6 months, and you had no bad record or you didn't find anything against them, after 6 months, after they passed that window, it was almost impossible to fire them. So Chinese workers today are protected under almost the same policy as the German labor unions. So the Chinese workers haven't needed a union, quote unquote. The government has always kind of supported or found ways to protect them. And this huge change in policy pretty much, if you run a new company in China, if you don't fire someone in 6 months, that employee is going to be with you for the rest of your life, which is a huge change. And you would think with an economy with so many people, that this would be impractical. But this is the policy now. This is the policy. And this is why over the last 5-6 years, the hiring from U.S. companies has been more not as aggressive as it used to be. It's because of this policy.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
We are in debt to China. I don't know how much, $1 trillion?
A lot. Yeah.
And the labor is still cheaper, right?
Yes.
And the mistake I'm understanding is we didn't go with the TPP. So now China has all these countries underneath them, and we have to trade individually with these countries, where China now controls all these Asian countries on trade.
Yeah.
So we made a mistake not going into the TPP, right?
I'm not a politician, and to be quite frank, I never, that agreement was like 10,000 pages long. So I wrote a dissertation. It was 166 pages, and I had to write that. Right? The TTP, I didn't want to read, okay, and I don't want to. Here's the thing was always going to happen. China has always exerted an influence in Asia. It has been for the last 2,000 years. And any agreement that we put together was not going to change that. It's like we have an influence over Mexico, we have an influence over Canada, and all the efforts that China could do probably wouldn't change that either. So I don't know if the TPP, thank you very much. I can't remember it, right? I try to forget it. Actually. I don't think they would have changed. I mean, from my point of view, this is from my point of view, I don't think it would have changed anything. I think what happened would have happened naturally, okay? And China will continue to exert huge amounts of influence in the Asian sector. Now, here's the real challenge: is most of the growth in the world is in Asia now. So the reason why China benefits is not only can they exert huge amounts of influence in Asia because that's where they're from, but also the majority of the growth is coming from that region. So they get a double benefit. Okay? But the problem is once they stop growing, they'll get the double negative as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think that agreement would have changed much of. I think China's position would continue to grow. Now, we have to stop beating up Mexico. That's one thing we have to stop. I lived in Mexico for a year. The Mexican people love America, and they're extremely hardworking. And here's something you don't know. I don't know, politicians don't tell you this, but the net immigration from Mexico is negative now. There are more Mexicans going back, and this is before Trump. This happened 2 years ago, in Obama's time. There were more Mexicans going back to Mexico than coming here. This has been happening for 2 years and will continue to happen. So my thing is, if we really want to continue to be a world dominance, we have to stop putting up walls and start, making friends. I know it's not a popular view, right? But nationalism only works for a little while, and usually if you're really powerful. But when you start competing against people who have been, competing against people for a long time, 2,000, 3,000 years, you need friends.
Got one more question.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Subject. What the heck is China going to do about North Korea? I mean, that is a very serious. We got two nuts, one here and one there.
You know the answer, Henry.
Sorry about
My dad was a politician. He taught me 2 words: no comment. I don't think they're going to be frank, that's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I mean, Kim Jong is smoke and mirrors. Nothing's going to happen with him. He's not going to bomb anyone, and no one's going to bomb him, and it's just... I'll tell you, we had the same thing happen in China with the Dawu Islands. Diaowu Islands. Where the governments tend to do this from time to time, where they try to, get people excited about something, and they'll say, oh, we had the same with Diaowu Islands, is where they said, oh, the Japanese, they're trying to take over these islands, right? And so for about 2 weeks, people went through the streets in China smashing Japanese cars, right? And it's like why? Why are you destroying a Japanese car? Because the Japanese want to take over this island where there's only like seagulls or something. There's like nothing there, right? And we do the exact same thing with North Korea, but we're attacking Kim Jong. I mean, not attacking him, but he's like this. There's this huge war going on, and I'm like, there's no war going on. Kim Jong's not going to attack anyone. We're not going to attack him, right?
So we're going to have to live with the nuclear weapons, basically.
Yeah, you're just going to have to live with it.
We're not going to do anything about it.
Nothing's going to happen.
They'll never give them up.
No, he won't give them up, and we're not going to go in there, and because you just don't want to. Look, you don't want to go in. You don't want North Korea, okay? There's a lot of places you want. That's not one of them. Beachfront property. Beachfront property.
I've got a question. I spent half my life in flying the seas off China and the South China Sea. Right now, the Chinese have built an island in the South China Sea. And it's a problem.
Yes.
It's a problem for us. And we don't know what the future is, and it's to be a spark between the two nations. Because we're going to protect the free oceans of the world, and particularly the South China Sea. So what's the impasse? How do we get around the impasse?
No, I think you have a great point. I think if there's one, that is a potential real problem. I don't know if a lot of people know, but China has been building this kind of a fake island, right? Fake news island, right? In the middle of the ocean. Oh, it's like, oh, it was there. Like, really? It was never there. You built it, right? So they built this island in the South China Sea, right? South China Sea. And a lot of it is so they could project their power. They could build a base there to control the route that goes around China, that goes over to India, over to Africa, because they do a lot of trade with Africa. They do a lot of trade with Africa. And the government, the way the Chinese government explains this, is to protect against piracy, because there is a great deal of piracy. But a lot of it is what they're trying to do is project power. It's one of those things that, it's like when we set up a military base in Japan, right? When we project power, right? Will it start a spark? Once again, it's one of those things I don't know. It's not my forte. Do I think it's a good idea for China to do this? Probably not. I think it's a very bad idea. Right now, the Taiwanese government is very anti-China. The new leadership in Taipei is quite anti-China. And Hong Kong is slowly becoming more and more anti-China. So there is a potential, of in that strait to becoming problems. Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore, they all do a lot of business with China, so they're not going to scream and yell so much. But if Indonesia has not typically been a friend of China, if they turn to be, come even more, let's say, reticent or become, anti-China, there is a potential that they may call in the U.S. to support the region, and then there's a problem. Then there's a problem. But for the time being, it was not a good decision, but it's still there. That's a good, very good point. Very good point.
I have a question.
One more question, okay.
Sorry. How is the growth of private enterprise in China?
How's the growth of private enterprise in China? You mean small companies, or large companies, or entrepreneurial? It's a very good question. I'll tell you from my viewpoint. Okay. Even though on the outside China or Chinese tend to appear to be entrepreneurial, they're extremely pragmatic, and they don't like to take risks. They're very risk-averse people. Americans, on the other hand, we're really daredevils. We travel the world. You look at crazy Patrick Woock, right? He travels the world to China. I set up 4 companies in China. I didn't even speak. The first company, I wasn't even speaking Chinese. Is that a smart idea? I don't think so, right? But that's how crazy I am, right? Chinese people, luckily, are a lot more practical. They'll wait till they speak fluent English. They'll take years to learn the industry, and then 10 years later they'll set up a company. In the big cities, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Shenzhen, Shanghai is in the middle, Beijing's on top, and Shenzhen is in the bottom. You're seeing a lot more entrepreneurship. The reason is not because those are different people, is because those places attract a lot of money. And there's a lot of young people that are attracted to those towns that want to make it big. Some of those enterprises have done well, but a majority of them are absolute failures. Do I think small enterprises will make the huge impact that they made in the United States? It's too early to tell. It's too early to tell. In the electronics industry, yes. I think the one area that China will continue to dominate and will probably take over will be the electronics industry, just because they have so much of it, it's right there, and all the world's electronics are produced in China. So it's much easier for them to create and develop companies. Outside of that, I think it's too early to tell. So.
One more question.
Okay,
There
one last question.
There is some wine over there, and there's some Chinese hors d'oeuvres. Please help yourself.
We'll just keep reminding you every 5 minutes. This is really the last question. Okay.
If the corporations are doing so well overseas, and if our stocks are going up, why is it that wealth is not being shared with the American workers who are working for low wages?
Such a good question. Yeah, I don't have all of it. It has been my firm belief that we need to do exactly what all the rest of the world does. Share the wealth. We have CEOs, our country in particular, the disparity between the CEO and the average worker is insane. I think it's almost 1,000% difference. And we are the only country in the world that does that. We're also the only country, when we ship our corporations abroad, that do not force our companies to hire domestic employees to work in those companies. Example, a lot of German companies in China, 20% of the workers, almost 100% of the top management are German. Japanese companies who go to anywhere in China, the top management, all Japanese. French companies, all French. US companies, all Chinese. See something wrong here? So, my recommendation, as it's always been, is we need, look, and here's the thing, is the way the US company says is, well, we can't find people to fill these positions. So okay, I said, okay, well, I'm willing to adapt. I'm willing to move to China, learn the language, give me a job. Then there's nothing they can say. So I think the thing that we have to do as a people is we have to encourage the young to be more dynamic, willing to go international. And then once we have those people say, hey, look, we've got the people, we've got the youth, they're there, you better give them jobs. Okay? And then it's up to me, to the people, the younger people here, to bring the money back, in our suitcases or whatever, right? But the government, the corporations, they're not going to bring it back. And I'll tell you one reason, it's an economic reason, okay? If you can earn 2% or 3% in the US or 9% in Asia, and you're a CFO, you're going to put the money in Asia. It's just how they think. Bad or good. So, in order to counteract that, I'm not a person that's going to force someone. I'm saying we need to give our youth the opportunity and have them adapt and have them bring the money back, because the politicians, the CEOs, they're not going to do it. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you.